Good evening, I'm Barkha Dutt and you're watching the Mojo Story, our independent digital platform that does a deep dive into the big stories of the day. On the program today, there seems to be no end to the growing controversy over what started with a tweet by Rihanna, and now a kerfuffle seems to have become a full-blown international controversy. One that at its center now has the niece of the American Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm talking, of course, about Meena Harris, who is a businesswoman in her own right, obviously entitled to her own opinions, but opinions that have not gone without comment. She is among the many international celebrities and high-profile people who took to Twitter to lend her support to the farmers' protest and described what was happening in India as an assault on the world's most populous democracy. Since then, she's had to face threats, vile misogyny online, and has even had her posters, along with those of Greta Thunberg and Rihanna, burnt by fringe groups on the street. Since then, she's taken to Twitter to say she will not be silenced, she will not be intimidated. Obviously, her comments are drawing even more focus because of who she is. You cannot escape the fact that she is also the niece of America's new Vice President Kamala Harris and, of course, has links with India. Kamala Harris's mother is, of course, from Tamil Nadu before she moved to the United States of America. The Vice President of America is, in that sense, multicultural and biracial, and this is her sister's daughter that we're talking about. The larger question, of course, still remains sharply divided public opinion at home and abroad as to whether these international celebrities should have waded in to an issue that has divided many here in India. Now, of course, at the Mojo Story, we've been on the ground relentlessly covering the farmers' protests, and we believe, or I believe, that this is an issue that has gone well beyond what you think of the legislations, and that's why it has become so contentious. Decoding where India stands in global perception and whether the Meena Harris controversy will now bring its own share of diplomatic embarrassment, let's introduce our panel on the Mojo Story this evening. We're joined by Sadanand Dhume, Wall Street Journal columnist, who doesn't agree. You've seen him on this platform before with how India has responded officially, but has a column out in the journal contentiously arguing that the three high-profile women chose the wrong cause to rally their support behind, got his share of flack from Indian liberals and global liberals for that. We're joined by G. Balachandran. Mr. Balachandran is a strategic affairs analyst and does also happen to be the uncle of Kamala Harris. In other words, Kamala Harris's mother is his sister. And while he doesn't want to be only known as that, I think he can't escape the twin identities that bring him on this program today. We're also joined by Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, one of our veteran diplomats, who has a piece out in the Quint today talking about how there is a kind of global defamatory campaign and India does need to counter that. So going against many liberals' opinion on that. And we have with us from Italy today, Annalisa Merelli of the Quartz, a senior journalist and commentator who's actually rallying behind all the women globally who've chosen to speak out and also making this a larger issue of diminishing freedoms in India. So a lot to really talk about. And I want to actually get started with Sadanand, if I may, because you seem to hold a rather complex position. You've been on this platform 24 hours ago saying the way the government responded, the way India's celebrities responded was banal, was unnecessary, was hysterical, and not doing much for India's image abroad. And then you follow it up with a piece in the journal saying Rihanna, Greta Thunberg, Meena Harris, Rupi Kaur, all of these have actually backed the wrong cause. How do you, Sadanand, explain your position?
Well, Barkha, I mean, we live in a time of complexity. And I don't think it's impossible to believe two things. One, first of all, I think that anyone has a right to speak about anything. People in India tweet about events around the world all the time. The Indian government talks about events in neighboring countries. It talked about the Capitol Hill insurrection a few weeks ago. So I think that's sort of the argument that, you can't talk about India unless you're in India or Indian. I think that's just childish. So let's get that out of the way to start with. And also let me sort of point out that absolutely, I think the way the Indian government has responded to this has also been childish, has been churlish, has in fact not helped India's cause at all. Now, the argument I'm making in my Wall Street Journal column is a little bit more complex. All I'm saying is that there is a caricatured view of this debate that has emerged in the West today. So it's become a bit of a cartoon where you have the good guys, and the good guys are obviously, the sons of the soil farmers, and you have the bad guys, which is like, the thuggish government backed by evil corporations. And my own view of these issues is that it's in fact much more complex. This does not mean that I don't have compassion for the particular farmers who are protesting. It's not that I don't understand that the laws may have implications for a way of life in places like Punjab and Haryana. But I just think that if you look at the laws themselves carefully, and if you look at the larger debate about the transformation of India, the modernization of the Indian economy, you recognize that this is not really one of those cases where it's easy to separate the good guys and the bad guys. Basically, you have a government that, in my view, has many, many things you can criticize it on. I've been on your show countless times and I've criticized it, and I continue to criticize it. But I think that on this particular issue, they have broadly got it right. And their failure of communication really has been that because there's such a sort of communications disaster in general, this particular legislation, which is one of the more sensible things they have done, it's kind of got clubbed in with everything else. And I think all I'm trying to do in my column is unpack that and say, don't look at this very complex issue involving hundreds of millions of people in a cartoonish way. Look at it in a complex way.
To be fair, the phrase you use is you basically accuse all of these women, and they've been mostly women for the most part, who actually jumped into this conversation of being reductionist. But aren't you doing the same yourself, which is to not recognize that all of these people who have commented responded, in fact, to the snapping of internet lines, responded to the barricading. And let me bring these images up for those of you who may not have seen it. These are images that we brought back from our reporting on the ground. Can we please bring up the iron rods, the cement walls, the concertina wires, the armed policemen behind them? The fact is that India's largest democracy should be able to protect the right of its people to peaceful assembly, to peaceful dissent. And yes, in large part, that has been happening for more than 2 months now. But this kind of barricading, even in the words of a former Delhi police commissioner, these images are horrifying. And the internet lines have been snapped. This is all my own reporting. It's not secondhand. And the fact is that while I feel for the police, and I think the police is damned if it does and damned if it doesn't, the people who reacted were reacting to images like this. They were not actually debating the farm law. So aren't you being as reductionist, Sadanand Dhume, as you're accusing them of being?
No, I'm not being. I think it's a valid point, but I think if you sort of step back a little bit, it's not as valid as it looks at first blush. The fact is that the reason this has turned into a caricature, the reason why the protests are seen as fundamentally for a just cause or heroic, and the government is seen as fundamentally unjust, predates the barriers, predates some of this. It basically goes back to how you think of the key demand, which is repealing the laws. Now, if you think the laws themselves are good, if you think that the laws would benefit many farmers across the country, there will be winners and losers. I don't have a Pollyanna-ish view of this, but that on the whole, these laws are one part of a solution to a highly complex problem that India must solve. Then you start sort of looking at it differently, right? Mm-hmm. Why has this emerged as something that is viewed in such black and white terms? It's because the farm laws are not understood. And while I recognize that what they're talking about is the protest, while I myself defend the right to protest, as you know, Barkha, and while I sort of decry any kind of police brutality, I just think that some of this all gets, mushed up together. So, for example, on the human rights question, I make the point not that the government has been great or the government has been perfect, but that if you, in fact, compare the government's treatment of this group of protesters with its treatment of other protesters, most recently the anti-CAA protesters, in this case, the government has been relatively restrained.
All right, but let's look at what's happened since then. But let's look at what's happened since then. Look at what's happened since then.
We live in an age of black and white where you cannot even make what to me is a common sense statement. Okay. I'm not saying they've been great. I'm just saying look at this in relative terms and be measured and balanced. That's all I'm trying to say.
All right. The problem is that, and I want to take this to Ambassador Prakash, and then I'll come to you, Professor Balachandran. Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, the problem is that the responses we've seen, both from the government, then from Indian celebrities belonging to cricket and cinema, and then, of course, from the troll armies, have neither been reasonable nor balanced. There has been a very, very stodgy, huffy-puffy statement from the government. There's been a coordinated chorus from India's celebrities, and there's been vile misogyny, vile trolling, death threats to Meena Harris, to Rihanna, to Greta Thunberg. Rihanna is being character assassinated on Indian television like she cares. And, I think many of us as women live with this, frankly, this rubbish online every day. But for people who are not used to it, they're absolutely staggered. They're absolutely taken aback. Meena Harris has gone on Twitter to say more than once that she's the kind of misogyny she's seen in the last few days she's never seen before, and that she will not be silenced. How does this help India make a strong case? And how do we escape the fact that the person we're actually talking about happens to be the vice president's niece? Ambassador Prakash.
Barkha, trolls are trolls are trolls. I don't think that they represent India or they reflect Indian culture. And trolls are people who misbehave on social media are not just in India, they're all over the world, unfortunately. We know that fact. So I don't have to respond for the trolls. It is for the system, for the social media handles, platforms, and government to deal with them. Now, let me be honest. Meena Harris, the reason why her tweets have gained salience is not because she's Meena Harris. How many of us, at least I did not know of Meena Harris before Ms. Kamala Harris became the vice president of the US. She is deriving this, in this particular case. I mean, I granted that she's an eminent person. She's a lawyer. She's very much a person of standing. Granted, but I'm talking of my own ignorance. I do not know of her, and I do know a few things. Now, the reason why her tweets have gained salience is because she happens to be the niece of Ms. Kamala Harris. Fair enough, but it is her viewpoint. And as you were mentioning earlier, she has a right to her viewpoint. As 1.35 billion Indians who have a right to their viewpoint, and I mean half of India had become experts in the U.S. elections. So that's very much a fact. Now, the point that I have been making and also made through my articles is I do not think that this sudden interest, is either altruistic or organic. As far as I am concerned, this is at the prompting of individuals, forces. Who they are, I leave it to everybody's imagination. But they have said that. All right, they have said that. I mean, I for one I would want hope is that anybody weighing into this matter familiarizes themselves with the actual situation, because that's being more responsible. Now, for her to say that it's an assault on Indian democracy, I think it's a bit too thick. Granted, India is a very small country of 1.35 billion people. If this is an assault on democracy, then morning in India, evening, afternoon, we'll have a democracy.
Two questions there. One, when you say, Ambassador Prakash, that it is being coordinated, are we really suggesting that Rihanna, Greta Thunberg, only the world's most famous climate change activist, Rihanna, one of the biggest sort of pop stars there is in the world, Meena Harris, businesswoman in her own right, niece of the vice president, and countless others, John Cusack, there are people from the NFL, sports people now jumping in. All of these are bound together by an unseen foreign hand. Are we really suggesting that? Are we back to that kind of paranoia? I could take the argument that there is a sort of moment where people believe that this is a trendy cause, and you could some would say patronize them, some would say criticize them. But when we suggest that there is a foreign hand, are we really suggesting that all of these very powerful people are governed by this invisible foreign hand? One, Ambassador Prakash, and two, our response, the burning of posters, the trolling, the misogyny, the anger, the rage, does this not show us to be less confident than we need to be as the world's largest democracy?
Well, let me take the second observation first. I don't endorse that, but This is not the first time. I'm 64 years old, and I've seen that happening again and again and again, not just in India, but all over the world. It's very, very easy to express yourself in this fashion. It's not the right way, but unfortunately, in democracies, not just in India, that is something that we see again and again. So I would not read too much into it. I mean, I wish that the discussion is civil, but well, this is how it is done. Now, I, for one, do not believe that Ms. Rihanna or the other worthies that have jumped into the fray would have had the time of the day for what's happening in India and about the farm protests. Obviously, I'm not talking conspiracies at all here. I mean, it is quite possible. I don't have proof of that, nor are these things done in public. That somebody, some individual went up to them who have some influence and said, "Well, this is happening. Give us a certain story and say, why don't you tweet it?" I mean, they did, or all right. This is my view, because I think it is highly unusual. They have a right to do that. I grant them the right. But I think that it's highly unusual. Rihanna, I mean, farm protests in India, and then to give it a spin that,
She also tweeted the day before that on Myanmar. I think she sees herself as a voice who speaks up on social justice issues, whether you believe superficially or not. May I just get, complete your point quickly. I want Sadanand to interject, and then I need to go to the others. Yes.
Happily. I'll take 39 seconds.
All right.
Myanmar and farm protests in India, I don't think they are the same thing. It's as similar as chalk and cheese. So for some of these people to jump into the farm and then to say police has been brutal, or there are barriers, or internet has been snapped, I think this is a bit too excessive. What did they expect? Here you have people who are actually, some are peaceful, but some others are using violence. They are scaling the Red Fort. Do you expect them to be given roses or welcome to the open arms? I'm sorry, I don't agree with that.
All right, Sadanand, I need you to come in very quickly because, I think you are traversing perhaps the most complex position of all, where you find the intervention, the reductionist, and the response of the government and high-profile Indians to be ludicrous, and you actually hold both positions.
There aren't both positions. It's one position. There's nothing contradictory at all. I have to say that it saddens me to see sort of a senior and respected Indian diplomat peddling essentially a conspiracy theory here. Let me be blunt. Who knows who went up to Rihanna and said something and whispered something in her ear? If we don't have evidence of this, we cannot state it just because it feels right, right? Maybe there is some grand conspiracy and people are whispering in people's ears and telling them, here's what you should tweet. But in the absence of evidence, I think the most sensible way to look at this is that this has become an international cause. It may not be similar to Myanmar in terms of its details for a person who follows international relations, but celebrities don't look at the world that way. As far as the world is concerned, there are stories about these suffering farmers in the cold and the internet being cut off, and I can quite easily imagine a celebrity looking at that and saying, "Oh, gee, isn't this so sad? Let me tweet about it." That is a perfectly normal and natural explanation. Perhaps the conspiratorial view is correct, but if you want to advance it, please prefer some evidence. I just want to put that there.
Okay, Ambassador Prakash, just hold on. Let me just bring in. You'll have all the time to respond to Sadanand, who has accused you of peddling a conspiracy theory. I know you're wanting to come in right away, but let's just have Annalisa come in, because Annalisa, you took this moment to actually jump in and talk about all the few independent media organizations that are actually reporting this story truthfully with all its shades, suggesting that many others in the mainstream media were presenting just the government narrative. But of course, you speak also as a woman journalist, and as women, we know that the moment independent women express an opinion, they are either patronized or they are threatened. So let me just bring you in at this point straight away. Go ahead.
Points. So the first is, yes, I think it's possible that globally there isn't quite enough of a nuanced understanding of the farm laws and even the way that the protests develop. But I think it's key, as you said earlier, that to understand that the reaction happened after the internet was cut, and the roadblocks were put up, and the where we're seeing the concertina wire, like all that was sort of what prompted the reaction. So it's really more connected to as it's been discussed, the state of democracy or the state of the freedom of speech. In fact, right when these people were talking, which is actually what prompted me to share, a list of independent publication. The Caravan's Twitter handle had been suspended, and this, there have been Twitter handle of independent journalists suspended before. A journalist had been arrested. So I think that's kind of what prompted people to be outraged and sort of call attention to what was happening beyond the actual matter of, or the substance of the farm laws. And it is true. I mean, I've seen the reactions against the women, because it's not been only women, there's been a lot of them, but they got singled out, and they, as it happens in these situations, they were insulted as people, not because of their opinions. I've seen people tweeting at me, well, you think that porn stars and prostitutes have better thoughts of economies, which, first of all, I don't know why they shouldn't, but
yeah. Can I ask you, though, to respond to Sadanand's column arguing that this was the wrong cause, this was a cosmetic intervention? There are people who believe this is the sort of Western savior complex. It's a kind of what Edward Said classically called Orientalism. It is the white world looking to step in to save India from itself. And there are Indians, who do support the farmers but might be feeling somewhat patronized. And the point is that complexity has gone out of the window, and I think it's in part the fault is how we've reacted as a country. If we had just reacted with more grace, with more generosity, with more openness, I think we would have been able to have this conversation, but we've not reacted like that. Annalisa?
Yeah, I think I perfectly see why one would hold that view, but I think exactly like this, people everywhere in the world see the news as they see the news. Lots of things have been happening. Lots of protests have been happening in India, for that matter, in the past years. And, this one caught their attention. And then you have, the Ministry of External Affairs intervening. Like the scale just gets out of proportion. And, and of course, then, we're discussing in the news that Rihanna said something about the farmers rather than perhaps the farmers themselves, or the way that the government is reacting.
Sure. Let me bring in Professor Balachandran now, who, as I said, has spent a number of years looking at strategic affairs, but also does happen to be the Vice President's uncle, and therefore Meena Harris's granduncle. I know you don't want people to be reminded of that, but we can't escape or divorce the connection. Just like when we talk about Meena Harris's tweets, we can't divorce the fact that she is the Vice President's niece, though, of course, entitled to her own opinions. Let me straight off ask you, how do you see the government's response, Mr. Balachandran?
Look, this is getting way out of hand. The images that you showed of the barbed wires, etc., were post-January 26th. They had been on protest strike at the site for how many weeks before that? Did you see any barbed wire, anything? No. So let's separate out the protest that was taking place for far long time before January 6th and the various reaction after January 26th. That's one thing. Two, I don't do tweets and things like I don't even watch them, but I would like to know if any one of you know which was the first tweet that either Meena Harris or Rihanna said about human rights violation anywhere. Did they talk about Hong Kong? Have you seen any tweet about no? So, I mean, I cannot for the life of me make out what inspired them. It could be just they got up, saw a photo in the papers and did it. But since I don't think much of them anyway, not because they're women, because they are people who just tweet. It's not as if they study anything. They just see something and tweet because that has given them freedom. So that's all I think. But please, the images that you show are all post-26th. And you cannot deny that January 26th was a definitive movement in the farmers' agitation. You're talking as if people are talking as if it was there all the time and they're suddenly woken up to it. Two, tell me which was the first human rights violation or anything that Meena sent on her Twitter or on her Facebook. Which was the one that, what is her name, that Swedish woman who goes around the environment? When was the first time she wrote about
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah. When was the first time she said about, let's say, Uyghur or any other human rights violation anywhere in the world? I don't think she's one of the frequent persons. Now, I may not agree with that is a conspiracy. I don't see why anybody should conspire against India. It's not as if such a great power that people are going to conspire against India. All that I think is the whole thing blew up because some overzealous Indians suddenly took up. They don't know anything what to do. They got a smartphone, they read a tweet, and they go on blasting everybody. I would have said, no, I agree with you. The government of India added fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Because of them. Now, I can think of a lot of reasons why they might do. What is that Swedish woman had done? She was supposed to be on the running for Nobel Peace Prize. She thought if I do that, my chances will.
You're sounding like Donald Trump, Mr. Balachandran. You're sounding like Donald Trump about her. You're sounding rather Donald Trump about her. You're talking. You're being unfair, right?
Look, I've studied environmental problems for a long time. No, it's not fair. I'm saying she has her views. She's not a great environmental specialist, which I have studied, okay? She has got a view. She feels strongly about it. I appreciate that. All that I'm saying is this. Has she, in the past, any of the other the first time she tweeted about human rights violation anywhere in the world?
But
or even Meena Harris. Not that I know of.
May I ask you?
Suddenly they woke up, they saw India.
But whose failure? But may I ask you? Do you agree with the response of the government? Do you agree with the trolling and the threats that Meena Harris has been subjected to? The fact that her posters are being burnt on the streets of Delhi by idiotic fringe groups. The fact that she's, that's rubbish.
Barkha, it's even silly of you to ask me that question. That whether I agree with burning
it's happening. No, I'm not saying you agree with it. I'm saying this is the reality of what's happening.
No, look, you asked me if I agree with that. I'm objecting to that.
I think it's no. I'm not asking you that. I'm saying
obviously no. The intelligent person will agree to such a thing.
I am saying that
unless you say I'm not intelligent, then you could say that.
Would I dare to? I'm saying, sir, that when the government, our biggest celebrities, our trolls, and our television channels start character assassinating women for having an opinion, we cannot make a strong case for ourselves on the international stage. The case that you're trying to make gets defeated when we do all of these things. When our television channels are talking about Rihanna in strip clubs, we are losing our own argument.
Let me be clear in what I say, and please don't interrupt me. What everybody says about the government, everything is rubbish. Misogyny and telling women, you do this, you do that, that everybody does that. I don't like it and I condemn it. There's no point in saying I condemn it. Unless I'm an idiot, I would condemn it. Are you thinking I'm an idiot? Now, was the government of India response valid? Government of India has never acted intelligently in these matters. So don't ask me whether they should have done it, they shouldn't have done it. But I am not government of India. I can tell you I don't write for the simple reason all that I'm saying is this. I have not known these people to be very involved in international human rights violation incident in the past, unless one of you can correct me. And I don't think any of you can correct me on that. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
2,
all right.
The images that you show about all the violations of post January 26th, you admit that it was a definitive movement. 3, they have got the rights. Of course, they have got the rights. Why not? I talk a right about. I came on your program and said Trump is an idiot. What does that make me? Now, the only thing is they didn't troll me. Unfortunately, the Indian public has nothing else to do. Go and troll everybody. You're anti-national. You're sedition. All those things. And I agree with you. The government encourages them in that. But I'm not the government. My personal view is this: Meena Harris does it.
I actually think
you don't ask me whether I agree with them, unless you think I'm an idiot. Okay.
I was actually not asking you whether you agree with them. I was trying to make the point that when all this happens, you can't be heard outside of this noise because you are being perceived as a country basis this noise, and therefore you can't make the arguments that you actually want to make. Okay, let me get the others.
That goes without saying.
Exactly. So that's all I was saying. Let me just get Annalisa and then I'll go back to Vishnu, Prakash and Sadanand Dhume. Now, Annalisa, there's, as you can see on this panel, and we deliberately try to keep it very nuanced, not people who are this way or that way, to try and get the fact that there's a complexity of emotions, that there are a number of Indians may actually believe how the farm protests have been handled is wrong, but that there could be Western reductionism. But yes, there is also misogyny. Yes, there is desperate overreaction from the government. Yes, that orchestrated chorus from India's celebrities, in my opinion, was pathetic. And all of this can be simultaneously true. And that we really want for a storyteller to come to our country and tell this story in all of its complexity.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fairly complex story. First of all, I wanted to just correct that I believe, several of the people who spoke up on this did speak up on other violations of human rights before. But also, yeah, there is this sort of, again, I just feel like this specific instance just got so out of proportion compared to the matter at hand, which is already pretty big and pretty serious. And, in many ways, it's sort of symbolic, though. And I think, you have sort of like an international eye or people reading, however superficially, concerned about the state of Indian democracy. And then you have authorities and high profile people react in a way that confirms their doubts on what's going on. So it's kind of now this pickle where it's quite hard to go back to the origin of just the farm laws, or go back to like what people should shut up and and just talk about that.
Can I ask you, what is the perception? And that's what I was trying to say to Professor Balachandran, getting very agitated with me, that when all of this happens, the point that you actually want to make to the world gets lost, right? Because the world is looking at you through the prism of these dramatic shots of the barricades. I agree this happened after the Republic Day, but I still do not think it's the best way to handle peaceful protests when they are peaceful. You have to prepare for the worst, but you have to allow for peaceful assembly. I think that these images have hurt our cause. I think snapping the internet lines have hurt our cause. My question to you is, what is the perception of, in the Western world, and I know no generalizations hold true, of India at this moment?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what is my perception as someone who probably follows India longer than, or like more than most other people, and probably what is escalated now that this controversy has been given this bigger space. And it is a sense that there is a limitation of rights, and I think specifically of all the things that we've seen, I think the internet is really becoming a big issue, like curtailing the internet, cutting the lines, trying like getting Twitter handles suspended of journalists, getting journalists in jail, like those things really kind of catch the attention and sort of confirms this idea that there is a limitation of speech, and as a result your allegiance kind of tends to go towards the farmers, because again, as as was said earlier, the black and white narrative is really very is always very tempting. And so if the government is cutting the lines and putting up barricades and concertina wires, then they must be the bad guys. So it kind of doesn't help any nuance in the situation either.
Let me ask you this, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, that when you actually speak of the international conspiracy, are you not feeding the world's negative image of us when we file sedition cases against journalists? Again, I would like to say that when journalists got the story wrong, they were irresponsible. Some were very senior and should have done their homework better. But in the fog of claims and counterclaims, mistakes can happen. We've all made them. The answer is not sedition. And when we file sedition cases against our journalists, are we not reaffirming questions of our democracy and our compromised freedoms to the world? I do have to ask you that.
Sure, it's a very valid question, and I was hoping you'll ask me that question and couch in the way you have. Barkha, we have perhaps had this discussion earlier also. I mean, journalists are very intelligent. They know a lot. They have inside information, but they are not above law. They are not God's gift to mankind.
But the law has to be sedition. The police could file a defamation case.
Now, Barkha, give me 2 minutes to say my bit, and then I will welcome any comment and haul me over the coals if you want to. So that's fine.
Never. But go ahead. Yeah.
No, point really is that journalists cannot have it both ways. They cannot say that we will say what we want to say, and then nothing should be done. If they are writing things, saying things which are absolutely wrong or are based on wrong assumptions, and that is creating complications. Obviously, action will be taken. Now, my colleague from Italy is talking about the Twitter handles of independent journalists being blocked. I mean, why should it not be blocked if just because it's an independent journalist, if something is being said which is wrong, why should it not be blocked? This sense of entitlement is something that I have a difficulty with. Also, I think I have a good track record of respecting women journalists. I've been in this game for a long time. But believe me, the men journalists or other men also are also subjected to similar harassment. Maybe not the abusive words. At times they're abusive by the trolls and journalists.
It's not the same, sir. I say this as someone who's at the receiving end. It's just not the same language.
My viewpoint. Bear with me. And, but I find when I tweet something which is not to their liking, I wish I can send you a screenshot of what kind of abusive tweets I get. But I don't wear the cloak of victimhood. Now, internet is something I am tired of hearing that, because it's a Western construct that if internet is taken away, it's like mother's milk, and the child will kind of will wither away. There is a very big difference. What is a necessity for people in the Western world, given their high quality of living? I mean, may or may not be in India. India, we have poverty, we have other challenges, and internet and the social media is an instrument which you very well know of disseminating or agitating people or gathering people or kind of stoking the flames of fire. So you have to take steps, whatever have to be taken.
Okay.
Last point. Can anybody tell me a police force anywhere in the world which faces a crowd of farmers without a weapon? On the 26th of January, the farmers attacked the police force. They were running. They had lathis, not a single weapon. I mean, give people their due. The kind of restraint that have been shown.
Different things here, and I just want to put them on record. And the different things are this, Ambassador Prakash. I agree with you on the police. I think the police was in a hopelessly difficult situation on the 26th of January. And in fact, these are of course the barricades. But if we actually come out of these pictures and we show you, there's a Reuters photograph that captures this moment where actually a policeman is at the receiving end of a stabbing attack that took place after the 26th of January. There you can see that Reuters photograph. So of course the police has shown enormous restraint. Of course the police is in a very, very complicated position. That point is taken. But I do not agree with you that the way to deal with journalists who get their stories wrong is cases of sedition. And I know that others were wanting to come in. Annalisa, you first, then Sadanand, and then we'll go back to Professor Balachandran. And so that's someone's Skype call going off, but Sadanand, go ahead. Yeah.
First of all, I have to sort of push back against Ambassador Prakash. Now, if you are in a society that penalizes journalists with really harsh and draconian laws for making what I would characterize as honest mistakes, which happen in the field anywhere, that is not what democracies do. That's just simply a fact. So you can say that, well, okay, we're reinventing what it means to be a democracy, and we want to be purely an electoral democracy, but we want to also be a place where freedom of speech and freedom of the media is very severely curtailed, because we think that allowing such freedoms is a mark of Western colonialism or whatever. He's entitled to that view, but I think that we must understand that across the world, in the democratic world, it will be seen rightly as democratic backsliding. And I think that is really the elephant in the room. What has happened over the last 7 years is that India's image as a tolerant, pluralistic, freewheeling democracy has taken the harshest knock that it has ever taken over the past 7 decades since independence. Now, all of this now has come to a denouement with these farmer protests, and I think some of the sort of and that is sort of muddying this argument, and it's kind of making people reach for examples which may not be the best examples, for example, of human rights violations. I agree with you and the ambassador that in this case the police have been relatively restrained, for instance, right? But the backdrop is that many of these democratic rights and many of these democratic values are under siege in India, and that is how the world sees them. Now, you can make the argument that, well, India doesn't believe in these values. Fair enough. And then the world will come back and say that, well, we don't think that your democracy is very healthy right now.
Yeah. I don't know where we lost Ambassador Prakash, but hopefully he'll reconnect in a couple of minutes. Annalisa, you wanted to make the point. I think you wanted to intervene on how women and men experience online backlash in a different sort of way. And also, it's not just online. I think you would very rarely say about a male celebrity that he's shallow or he just tweets for the heck of it. At least I haven't heard that said about Hollywood stars. You don't say, oh, what does George Clooney know about Sudan? You just don't say that. You just accept that Clooney knows everything that there is to know about Sudan. But if Rihanna says it, oh, she must be an heiress.
Exactly.
Who
told her? Who went up and whispered to her here that there's a country called India and things are going on up there. Absolutely. And I felt that it was essentially my duty to say that, no, it is not true that men and women experience backlash in the same way. It's not true that women journalists, and, I have a lot of friends who are women journalists in India, absolutely, they do not get the same fair treatment that male journalists get. And 100% it's not victimhood. And I just wanted to say that out loud. It's, in fact, it's condescending, and it's a very sort of sexist view to say that speaking up against that kind of backlash is victimhood.
You can make the point that interventions are cosmetic as long as you make that when men make those interventions, and I just don't see that kind of talking down. Now, I have 5 minutes left. Let me just take final comments. I'll start. Professor Balachandran, if you can hear me, are you there? And can you hear me?
I thought I was out of that discussion, so I thought I must have watched the TV news.
No, please. I want your sense. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll give you a brief, please. Okay, one. As I was telling you, I forgot, bloody hell. That's a different matter. There's no point in diplomatic fallout. Will be people, the other diplomats will be wondering, what, we thought the Indian diplomats were sophisticated and intelligent. What the hell are they doing? That will be the first diplomatic fallout. Two, as far as India's reputation is concerned, it's not as if this is the first event that people suddenly woke up. As one of the other panelists said, although I don't agree with all that he says, this has been going on for the past 5-6 years. So those people who were on the belief that democracy and freedom are to some extent backsliding in India would say, this only confirms that. Those who are oblivious to what is happening in India, they'll say, look, this is all a bad story. India is a good. So I don't think in the substance, India's reputation will be damaged extraordinarily. And two, if only Rihanna had said it, I don't think this would have been so much of a storm. It is that Meena Harris, just like you are having me because I'm Harris' uncle, people are saying Meena Harris is her niece. Not because they are a Swedish woman.
But it's true. What can we do about it? We can't help the fact that you're an uncle and she's a niece.
No, that's all I'm saying is this. And added to this was the more reaction by me. They had kept quiet. It would have, Indians would have done in any case. That doesn't matter. India's reputation because of the trolls is not going to suffer much more than what it was. Only the diplomats around the world will say, what the hell has happened to the Indian diplomats? We thought they were intelligent. Now they're responding to all these sort of things. Yeah. So those people who thought Indian democracy was sliding will say, this only confirms the views. Those who said nothing has happened in India will say, this doesn't matter. Now, as far as Kamala Harris' uncle is concerned, he said, all this, what we have been talking for 30 minutes, we are all agreed on. All that we are saying, why do we agree on and why do other people don't agree with us? That's all I have to say.
Sure. Fair enough. Let me actually now take this very quickly to Annalisa and Sadanand. I think Sadanand actually, Professor Balachandran, in a rather angry way, has captured many of the complexities that you've been trying to convey.
No, I don't think he's been angry at all. I think he's made excellent points. There is a lot of complexity. I have one slight disagreement with him because I think that what is happening now with these sort of really top global celebrities weighing in is that something, a vague sense of unease about the direction in which India was headed is becoming more mainstream. Right now, in the past, maybe this would have been confined more to people who are analysts, people who are journalists like Annalisa, who follow these things quite closely. My sense is that when very big celebrities get involved, then this sort of percolates beyond the people who are necessarily paying much attention to India, right? So in that way, this is really a signal failure of Indian public diplomacy. And the point I made on your show yesterday is that, well, I mean, Indian public diplomacy is in shambles because, frankly, the ruling party is obsessed with protecting its with communicating with its own semi-hysterical base. And it doesn't know how to communicate to the rest of the world, and that is the problem, which has sort of come to a head over here.
All right, Annalisa, quickly, last word to you.
I mean, I actually agree with everything that he said. I just feel this may be just that casus belli that now gets people very interested in what happens in India in terms of democracy and developments. And yeah, if it comes at the sort of price of not paying nuanced attention to the farm laws, then be it. I think it's a bigger issue that, and I actually welcome the international scrutiny on it, although I am also part of that. So.
Yeah, I would say that actually the way we've responded has made a bad situation worse. If there was a way to get the complexity of the conversation around the farm laws across to the world, this is not the way to do it. If you wanted to say you're above Rihanna, Meena Harris, and Greta Thunberg, filing police cases and character assassinating them on primetime television is not the way. Burning posters, however those groups may be fringe, is not the way. To figure out whether Rihanna is a Muslim name or a Christian name is not the way. And certainly to huff and puff in a government statement to the Republic of Rihanna is not the way either. So, I just think that I take the point that there's a very complex story that is unfolding here, but I think the way we've tried to convey that complexity has actually stereotyped us further. Leaving it there, Sadanand, Annalisa, Professor Balachandran, and earlier to Vishnu, Prakash, thank you. It's been a pleasure. To our audience, see you same time, same place tomorrow, and thank you for watching as always. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.